Hola, este que les habla es jehivian Hernández y bienvenido a mi podcast La Vieja Confiable. Bueno, gente, este episodio va a ser completamente en inglés, así que de ahora en adelante todo va a ser en inglés. Well, as I was mentioning, in Spanish, and now I'm going to mention it in English, this episode is fully in English. Why I make this warning? Well, because if you look at the rest of the episodes and how they're structured, this podcast is in Spanish. But I made the exception for two reasons. First of all, because I've been thinking for some time to start incorporating some episodes in English, because there are many guests that I would like to talk to, and I'm limiting the availability to have them because I've structured this just as a Spanish podcast, given that I'm Puerto Rican, but also because my guests only speak English. So from now on, this episode will only be in English, nothing more in Spanish. If this is the first time that you are in this podcast and you're listening to this episode, probably it's just because of the topic and who the guest is, Amy Jo. So I welcome you. My name, as I mentioned in the very, very beginning, is jehivian Hernandez. And, this is my podcast. Today, we're going to be talking about having a discussion, more so with Amy Jo. I first learned of this great woman's existence because I listened to a testimony that she gave in Congress about poverty. And without, eliminating any credit and value to the other testimonies, I think hers was one of the best of that day because she brought that sense of humanity back into the conversation, right? Not only because she talked from testimonies and people that were living the struggles and the reality of being poor in the United States, but also because she herself has been through that. She's a person that talks from her own experience. She talks about what has been, being a single mom with economic insecurity, with food insecurity. That is her reality, or was her reality for a big part of her life. So I heard her testimony, and I knew that I had to meet this woman, and I didn't want to eliminate, or have I did not want that the language barrier was an impediment for me to be able to bring her to this space and be able to share with you our conversation. So yeah, I'm just gonna stop talking here for this introduction. I'm gonna leave you right now with her testimony because I want you to have as the background, as the base of the starting point, what she said in that conversation and that testimony, and then I will lead you directly to my conversation with Amy Jo. So I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you enjoy it. And here it is. Here's my conversation with Amy Jo.
Hutchinson. Good morning. My name is Amy Jo Hutchinson. I'm a single mom of two who's lived in West Virginia all my life. I'm also a community organizer for West Virginia Healthy Kids and Families, Our Future West Virginia, where I organize and advocate for poor and marginalized folks. Today, I'm here to help you better understand poverty because poverty is my lived experience. And I'm also here to acknowledge the biased beliefs that poor people are lazy and that poverty is their fault. But how do I make you understand things like working full-time for $10 an hour is only about $19,000 a year, even though it's well above the federal minimum wage of $7.25 an hour? I want to tell you about a single mom I met who was working at a gas station. She was promoted to manager, and within 30 days, she had to report her new income to DHHR. Within 60 days, her rent bumped from $475 to $950 a month. She lost her SNAP benefits and her family's health insurance. So she did what poor people are forced to do all the time. She resigned her promotion and went back to working part-time just so she and her family could survive. Another single mom I know encouraged her kids to get jobs. For her DHR review, she had to claim their income as well. She lost her SNAP benefits and her insurance. So she weaned herself off of her blood pressure medicines because she, working full-time in a bank and part-time at a shop on the weekends, couldn't afford to buy them. Eventually, the girls quit their jobs because their part-time fast food income was literally killing their mother. You see, the thing is, children aren't going to escape poverty as long as they're relying on a head household, it was poor. Poverty rolls off the backs of parents and right onto the shoulders of our children, despite how hard we try. I can tell you about my own with food insecurity. The nights I went to bed hungry so my kids could have seconds, and I was employed full-time as a Head Start teacher. I can tell you about being above the poverty guideline, nursing my gallbladder with essential oils and prayer, chewing on cloves and eating ibuprofen like they're Tic Tacs because I don't have health insurance and I can't afford a dentist. I have 2 jobs and a bachelor's degree, and I struggle to make ends meet. The federal poverty guidelines say that I'm not poor, but I cashed in a jar full of change the other night so my daughter could attend a high school band competition with her bands. I can't go grocery shopping without a calculator. I had to decide which bills not to pay to be here in this room today. Believe me, I pulled myself up by the bootstraps so many damn times that I've ripped them off. The current poverty guidelines are ridiculously out of touch. The poverty line for a family of 3 is $21,720. Where I live, because of the oil and gas boom, a 3-bedroom home rents for $1,200 a month. So if I made $22,000 a year, which could disqualify me from assistance, I would have $8,000 left to raise 2 children and myself on. And yet the poverty guidelines wouldn't classify me as poor. I Googled congressman's salary the other day, and according to Senate.gov, the salary for senators, representatives, and delegates is $174,000 a year. So a year of work for you is the equivalent of almost 4 years of work for me, and I'm $24,000 above the federal poverty guidelines definition of poor. It would take 9 people working full-time for a year at $10 an hour to match y'all's salary. I also read that each senator is authorized $40,000 for state office furniture and furnishings, and this amount is increased each year to reflect inflation. That $40,000 a year for furniture is $360 more than the federal poverty guidelines for a family of 7. And yet here I am, begging you on behalf of the 15 million children living in poverty in the United States, on behalf of the 1 in 3 kids under the age of 5, and nearly 100,000 children in my state of West Virginia living in poverty, to not change anything about these federal poverty guidelines until you can make them relevant and reflect what poverty really looks like today. You have a $40,000 furniture allotment. West Virginia has a median income of $43,000 and some change. People are working full-time and are hungry. Kids are about to be kicked off the free and reduced lunch rolls because of changes y'all want to make to SNAP. Even though 62% of West Virginia SNAP recipients are families with children, the very same children who cannot take a part-time job because their parents will die without insurance. People are working full-time in this country for very little money. They're not poor enough to get help. They don't make enough to get by. They're working while they're rationing their insulin, and they're skipping their meds because they can't afford food and health care at the same time. So shame on you. Shame on you, and shame on me, and shame on each and every one of us who haven't rattled the windows of these buildings with cries of outrage at a government that thinks their office furniture is worthy of $40,000 a year and families and children aren't. I'm not asking you to apologize for your privilege, but I'm asking you to see past it. There are 46 million Americans living in poverty, doing the best they know how with what they have, and we, in defense of children and families, cannot accept anything less from our very own government. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hutchinson.
Thank you.
So Amy Jo, I'm so glad that we have this opportunity to talk. So first of all, welcome and thank you for taking the time to be with us.
Thank you. I was very excited when I read your email with the invitation.
Yeah. I think that as I was telling you, and I think I might have made some references in the email, I don't know, but our conversation and the reason that we're talking today begins by after I saw the clip of your testimony in the congressional hearing. If I'm not mistaken, was talking about the poverty line, right? I think that
Mhm.
was the what they were discussing at that point. And I think that one of the things that really struck me, and I really, and it's bizarre to say it this way, but what I enjoyed, even though in taking that with caution, what I want to say, but what I think it was great about your speech and your testimony is both not only the eloquency in which you express your concern and what you're advocating for, but that you spoke of it from a personal experience, right? You spoke of it from a real down to earth experience, because when we tend to listen about people talk about poverty and all these issues, tends to be something distant from them. It tends to be something with a very technical perspective. It tends to be with a more academic understanding and with very theoretical, but the general experience, that emotion that comes with it, is eliminated from that discussion. May it be intentional or not, it's just always ends up being that abstract discussion, right? It doesn't resolve anything because it doesn't bring the reality of what poverty is. It's just like this specimen that you can just research it, as if it's not something that people are suffering, right? And so let's talk about more of what is your background, right? Let's talk about who you are and what is it that you essentially are advocating for and what are you working for. So essentially, who's Amy Jo, and what is she working for?
I have, I'm quickly approaching my 50th birthday, and I've lived in West Virginia all my life. And I've also never been financially secure my entire life. So I like to say that all throughout my life, there's always been poverty on some level. You know, right now, I read an article the other day that separated social classes, economic classes, by whether or not you were able to work from home. And so when I was reading that article, and I'm like, I've been working from home for throughout this whole coronavirus pandemic, and I'm like, wow, that means I'm middle class, according to this article. So it really has me thinking. I am, I'm doing a lot better now financially than I ever have before, but there's still always um, a struggle. Like my car was acting up, so I just had to take my car to the garage for a couple days, and now it's going to be a game of catch up to get that paid for and be able to pay the rest of my bills, right? So I guess now I'm kind of working poor to bring that phrase up. So that's my experience. I'm also the only parent of two kids, and so it's a one income household, which always creates a bit of a deficit. Um, I'm also an organizer for a grassroots organization called Our Future West Virginia. And my primary focus in my work, it's been a lot of organizing around SNAP benefits. We used to call them food stamps back in the day. But I have a strong passion for organizing poor women, especially single moms, because that's my lived experience. So I guess I'm a social justice, what's the word? I hate to use the term warrior, but you know, I battle a lot of social injustices a lot of times. So with the power of people, yeah.
Yeah, no, I wanted to ask. It's interesting what you mentioned about that article. What is it? Again, I think it's interesting because again, I think this goes back to what I was saying, right? A lot of people like to talk about these stuff of what is living poor, etc., and trace these abstract lines, right? Where they have whatever they want to define as sort of privileges, right? So how did you felt when you read that article saying that, um, even though you have this, you have a sense of economic insecurity as a reality in your life, even though you are better now than you ever been, but still, these small details or these small events that can be huge, as your car breaking down or having everything. How does that reality compares to reading that because you were able to work from your home? Then you're sort of middle class. Like, how do you approach, how you react to that?
If I am the picture of the middle class in America, then we're in bad shape. So I, I think that was where I kept coming back to. I'm like, I understand the idea and the thought behind that article. I'm not on the front lines anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I have worked retail. I've direct care. I've been caregivers for people of all ages and all abilities throughout my life, but I'm not there anymore. And
Yeah.
so, and granted, my risk was a little lower. My
Mm-hmm.
risk of the virus, but then I know people who are really struggling and are still relying on the welfare system to get by, and they're working at home as well.
Mm-hmm.
Because and so I'm like, that's just a kind of a broad brush, stroke of like a broad
Mm-hmm.
brush stroke. Um, and it also made me question the socioeconomic status of the author, if
Yeah.
that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So um, I'm just wondering, like, how do you really classify someone as middle class based upon the privilege of whether or not they can work at home um, in a once in a lifetime pandemic situation.
Yeah.
So yeah, it kind of left me befuddled, for a couple of minutes. And I have a huge amount of privilege right now. And even with my job, just being an organizer, that has opened up a ton of doors for me.
Mm-hmm.
And I've learned skills and I've had opportunities present themselves to me that I never had before. So I mean, I'm very aware of the amount of privilege that I have. I just don't consider myself to be even middle class. I'm kind of like teetering between lower middle class, maybe, and middle
Okay.
class. If
Yeah.
that makes sense. Does that
No,
make
yeah, yeah.
sense?
Of course. A question. Obviously, we're going to details into your work in a bit, but uh, continue the discussion and writing these terminologies of middle class, etc. I've always found that these terms of having, I think that there's this very romanticized idea of being middle class here in the US, right? And everybody, for some reason or the other, they want to feel that they're middle class, it's heading to being wealthy. And for some reason, they also romanticize the struggling elements of the struggle and the hustle and those ideas in which a lot of people find that they are inherent in being middle class because middle class are always screwed, or middle class are this or that. And so I think that I found that I have family and that I have discussions with my family of mine, that they, I don't know, when they were younger, they were in a very, I don't know, living in the I don't know, in very scarce situation, living in, and I forget the terminology, um, but they were living in situations in which they're not living right now, right? They managed, for some other reasons, whatever they are, they've managed to be in a more privileged but objectively more wealthy positions than the rest of the country, but they still like to consider themselves middle class, right? They
Mhm.
still like and they fight for the idea of being middle class, even though whatever they're living, the realities of their lives says otherwise, right? And so I don't know if you've had that experience or what did you have to say to right to what I'm commenting, but I find that a lot of this terms ends up being just romanticized things that we tend to fight over, and that at the end of the day tends to diminish or dilute or eliminate sometimes, and forget the real struggles that people are having in their day by day, just because I'm middle class and I want to be that no matter what. I don't know if
Mhm.
what I'm saying makes sense.
Yeah, it makes sense to me. I think, um, I think solidly middle class is what I would consider to be the American dream.
Yeah.
I mean, I was raised up thinking that, um, I wanted the nice house, where there
Mm-hmm.
were enough rooms for everything, plus a guest room. And I
Yeah.
wanted to pick a fence and the perfect family. And I wanted good schools for my kids. And I wanted a great job, or better yet, I wanted to be a stay-at-home mom, right?
Yeah.
And so, I mean, I just, in my head, the way I envision the American dream is just being okay, like not having any
Mm-hmm.
worries. You're not really wealthy, you're not poor, you're not struggling, and you have enough money in your bank account to pay for an emergency and like 6 months worth of bills.
Yeah.
To me, that would be solidly middle class. And I do think that we have this romanticized opinion of what that, what it's supposed to be. And I can remember, actually, my girls and I still do it. Just driving through different neighborhoods
Mm-hmm.
and looking at the houses. And um, we've recently moved, my family, and my when we moved here, we moved from a very low income neighborhood, a very low income life, and
Mm-hmm.
now we're outside of the city a little bit. But we were driving around the neighborhood the first day or two we were here, and my youngest daughter says to me, "Mom, are we rich now?" And, it was because the houses, like, first of all, we're not in the city anymore. I mean, so that
Mm-hmm.
automatically, people here, we have a yard now. Like, I
Yeah.
had to go and buy a lawnmower, um, because we didn't have a lawnmower. So, I mean, there's, those physical differences like that, just the different amount of space that we have now. But it was also just the fact that, homes were painted well, or the porches were nicely decorated, and you could just look around and feel like someone lived there and had enough time and resources to actually try to make that place appear to be cozy,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so
Mm-hmm.
um I'm like, I think that, because it's just this romanticized, like a Hallmark movie idea of what a small
Yeah.
town should look like, so I totally agree with what you say.
My sister and I, um we tend to do the same where we live. I live in Florida and Melbourne, and we tend to go sometimes on the weekends, particularly right now with the COVID that we have nothing to do. And sometimes it's just, let's just get in the car and drive around just to get out of the
Mhm.
house. And we drive around and see, watching, just looking at houses and stuff like that. And at least for us, we first of all, we see the house and we say, okay, we can't afford this. There's no way we're gonna be able to afford this for now. My sister says always, like, because she's the one working in this house, I got to get married to be able to even to start starting to afford this house, right? Again, we're single, we don't have families, like, I don't we don't have children and anything like that. um but it's how difficult, right? And we are in a situation of privilege. There's no way that I could say that I am not in a position of privilege, right? But you look at these dream houses and everything, and you start realizing, particularly when you look at certain communities, that you have these wretched little houses that it just, it's just almost destroyed, and there are people living there. And right
Mhm.
across the street, you have this humongous house, beautiful, with a porch, with everything. And you start looking at what is that economic inequality that you see in very small little communities, right? It's just so vivid, because you don't need to see the car. You just need to look at, sometimes, this house is beautiful, the next house is just decrepit, right? And
Mhm.
you start looking around your community. We live in an apartment building, but every time that we start looking, you see the discrepancy in that house. We start, and I think that the initial or the automatic reaction is, why the hell the house is still there? Like, why haven't nobody, uh, I don't know, bought it and built a better house or something like that? It's a very insensitive thing to say. Um, but again, it's just, trying to think that everybody should be in the same level, right? And everybody should be
Mhm.
with beautiful houses. Everybody should have that idea. But then again, that alone, that facade, that physical structure that's there, obviously we don't know the struggles that may be inside that house, but it's a very palpable physical reality of the inequality that lives in that we live in this country. And then for some reason we ignore, right? We talk
Mhm.
about it again, but we just ignore because we all aspire to have the big house, and we see it as a very personal fault. It's our fault that we are not living in that house, right? It's not the system, is not the politics of around us, it's not the policies that our governments are putting forward, or who is putting money in politics, or who is in government. If we see it as a very personal thing, right? That it's our fault that we are not able to afford that $800,000 house that we so much liked, right? And sure, it career wise, etc., could be, but there's bigger problems there. And I wanted to ask you all of this just to ask part of the rationale of the U.S. has also been this very individualistic perspective of what that American dream is, right? Is you have to struggle to achieve it, you have to hustle to achieve it. And so, how have you come around that type of discussion and that reality with a lot of people? That it's not that they don't want to, uh, s- and that's not they're lazy or stuff like that. Is that everything around them, the reality in which they're living, isn't makes it impossible for them to achieve whatever goal they wanted.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I think this is why it's important for us to have conversations like this one.
Mm-hmm.
It's another reason why I'm grateful for your invitation, because it's hard to have these conversations. Um, like me, I'm one person,
Mm-hmm.
so it's really difficult for me to have enough of these conversations for me to feel
Yeah.
like it's finally picking up. Excuse me, right? So I'm very grateful for social media now. I'm so grateful for that, because you do have the capability of taking those messages and getting them out
Mm-hmm.
further. And I think that's key. Maybe one of the advantages that I've had um, in my organizing work is that I'm seen as being solidly middle class, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I have a tendency to have like the middle class types of values. I value education. I value hard work. And I think that has made it a little easier for me,
Mm-hmm.
um, because I haven't had to deal with a lot of the prejudices
Yeah.
that oppressed people and poor people have to deal with, right? So just the way people view me and see me has opened doors for me that a lot of people wouldn't have the opportunity to have opened,
Mm-hmm.
and by open doors, I mean just to be able to have that conversation.
Yeah.
So one of my biggest rants always is stop blaming the poor people and start
Mm-hmm.
blaming the system that keeps them that way.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, um, I think poverty is to be expected when you're living in a capitalistic system. Anyway,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's the system that it hurts people and benefits people at the same time, right? It's
Yeah.
very complex, and so, um, but the laws that govern us and the laws that make poverty, I mean, it's just bad policy.
Mm-hmm.
And I think one of my biggest struggles lately is the fact that how can we convince people that we need to start changing the political landscape as far as who we elect? You
Yeah.
know, um, do we start talking about it as, is poverty a moral issue?
Mm.
Is it a reflection of our values as Americans?
Mm-hmm.
And how can we expect to elect someone who has had no lived experience of any struggle?
Mm-hmm.
And by struggles, I mean, um, like poverty is what I'm talking about
Yeah. Yeah.
specifically. But how do we even expect them to be able to understand and be able to draft policy that's going to
Mm-hmm.
make my life better? Because there's no
Yeah.
way you can't read about this in a book.
Mm-hmm.
You can't read about poverty. You can learn the definitions, but you don't learn about the trauma, and you don't know what it's really like for someone in this situation until you sit and talk to them about what's it like to be constantly stressed. Toxic stress comes with poverty. Trauma comes with
Mm-hmm.
poverty. And I think those are topics that we just fail to address. I think
Yeah.
that comes along with, like you were saying earlier, we do ignore and avoid conversations about poverty here. And so, of course, we ignore what poverty does to a young child's brain development. And of
Mm,
course, we ignore the trauma that people carry with them for their lifetimes if they were raised in poverty, regardless as to whether or not they escape, right? And anyway, I just to get back to your question, um, I think we just need to have those conversations in real language and
mm-hmm.
maybe not have to dress it up. I think maybe that's why my testimony like caught fire the way that it did.
Yeah.
It was because I wasn't using big words, and
Yeah.
it was just real talk, right? I was talking about gas station attendants, and
Mm-hmm.
um, I really think that's why people listen to that testimony. I said never, probably, I'm assuming never before have that many people sat through an oversight committee hearing,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and
Yeah.
because and some of the people that I personally know who have contacted me about the video, these are people that I've known for 30 years and I've never heard a political word come out of their mouth,
Mm-hmm.
but there was just something about it. And so maybe that was the biggest benefit, in my opinion, from the whole testimony is the fact that I was given the space to present it in just nonsensical, everyday language, and to where the people who were living it, I hope they felt inspired and empowered.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. Again, it's just that again, when I was to tell you out of the taping, when I saw it, I was like, I have to meet this woman. Like I was like, I need to meet this person. I need to talk to her. And
Thank you.
again, yeah, because again, it's just the element of how real it is, right? Again, uh, look, a bit of me in this, for to see where I'm coming from. I don't come from a wealthy family, by all means, right? But I still have privileges, and those privileges come because my dad, thankfully, after my parents separated, my dad, he made his own business and it ended up being successful. To be considered in some way middle class man with his own business, a small business owner in Puerto Rico, which that opened, um, a lot of doors for us, for my sister and I, in many ways, right? We aren't the people that we were worrying a lot in how if we're gonna
Hmm.
eat tomorrow, for example. We knew that we were gonna have food, even though if we like opened the fridge and it was empty, we knew that tomorrow we are gonna have food. We knew that we were just one phone call away to some relative that was gonna give us something to eat if we had to, right? So
Yes.
that type of stress, we didn't have in our lives, right? I know that I comes from a sense of privilege because of that. But at the same time, I know the disadvantages that I had because my mom, for example, and I think this is something that people a lot also forget about, is that my mom, my parents got divorced when I was like in third grade. And my mom, a bit before that, we were living here in Florida and we had to move to Puerto Rico because she was diagnosed with lupus and arthritis and a lot of other conditions that forced her. And the doctors told her, if you don't leave, by the time you're 30, you're going to be dead. The weather here,
Wow.
even though it is warmer, is not good for you. The changes here are not good for your health. You have to leave. And so the government, right, she fought it and the government gave her Social Security. But then that Social Security she had, I don't know, for most of our lives, teens and young age, she had a certain amount of money. But as soon as my sister and I, we ended up getting out of high school and going to college, they cut that into like a half of it, right? So what they were giving her because of my sister and I, she no longer had it. She could have fought it, but it was not going to be hers, right? And that forces people to enter the economy in sort of informal ways, right? Because now the government's saying to my mom, you can again. My mom she's been in Social Security since she's like late 20s. She's 50 now, so around 20 plus years she's been in Social Security without working. So she's the government is telling her, my mom, you can live with $12,000 a year, right? That's what they're telling her. And so that that's that perspective alone, it tells you, right? And again, I don't come from I'm not poor because we're not, because how we live, right? The stresses that we have are not there, me personally. But if my mom was alone, if she didn't have us or the people that supported her, she would be only living with $12,000 a year. And the government says
Yes.
that's okay. You see? And that is a person that is
Mm.
sick. That is sick. So it's not, we are all 28. My sister's 25. She's divorced. She lives alone. She only pays her house, the bills, whatever. But she needs to, even with being sick, everything, she needs to, you know, sometimes enter the informal economy. I mean, when I say informal, I'm not saying she's selling drugs. I'm saying that she's hustling around and baking cakes, things like that, hustles around to be able to pay her bills, right? So that's another element that it's there, that is institutionalized, right? Because the government has said, and I think this is what part of what comes with your testimony is so relevant, is that you trace this line saying from here up no longer are poor, but are they? Are they no longer poor, really? I think that's the reality that a lot of people resonated. Is like, oh, yeah, sure, I'm not poor, then what the hell am I? Because if this being rich, then we are screwed as a like this, and that's sort of the you know, only putting my case or my part of my story there. But I think that's how I resonated. That's how I think from there is that I approach your testimony. That I saw you saying this, explaining it how you were explaining it, and I was listening. I was looking as like my mind was my mom. The neighbors of my mom in Puerto Rico, people that went to church with, stuff like that. Then I knew that for some technicality, they were not poor, but we all knew that they were poor, that they were living in conditions
Yes.
that it wasn't a person that was quote unquote and a livable wage.
Yes. I just wrote down. It made me wonder. I wonder what their definition. Not even definition. I wonder what mental images are evoked when they talk about poor,
Mm,
because they do feel as if $12,000 is enough.
yeah.
You know, so is poor in their minds destitute,
Mm,
completely destitute. You know, if
yeah.
you're not literally struggling for every breath, then are you just not poor? You know, so
Yeah.
maybe that's a different way of approaching this with our electeds. You know, is to ask them, what do you think about? What are the images that come to mind when you say poor and poverty? You
Mm-hmm.
know, because it's probably not the child care worker,
Mm-hmm.
you know, it's a respectable career, right?
Mm-hmm.
And yet most of West Virginia's childcare workers are living in poverty. They're
Yeah.
making poverty wages and relying on some form of assistance, whether that's Medicaid insurance or SNAP benefits, you know? So maybe that would be an interesting way to have them tell us what poor looks like to them.
Yeah, to them, for them to maybe it's just textbook poverty what they have, right? It's just movies that if is, you know, when you only have an approach by things by how you have seen it, maybe in a documentary or a
Yes.
movie or stuff like that. That's the only approach that you have to that. Because again, I think again, the good one of the good things about your testimony is that you make this contrast between their salary and what people generally earn, right? When you throw that to their face and say this is what you guys are earning, right? Because a lot of people, the interesting thing is that a lot of these folks that are there that have been, I don't know, 30 years in them, probably when they came first time to office, they were middle class, lower middle class families, that they were, you know, they had sort of small privileges that allow them to arrive there. But after 30 years of earning over $100,000 a year, you're no longer in that community. You're no
Right.
longer in living that experience, right? And if you remember what's the experience of being poor 30 years ago, you have no idea what the hell being poor today is, right?
Yes.
And I think that's the disconnection sometimes that you'll see when these people talk about, oh, what I did, because I love when people throw that shit to me, saying, oh, but I was able to do this and this. Yeah, 30 years ago when life was totally different, when being poor or middle class meant totally different things that it means today with the economy that we have today, and how you made it to, I don't know, to have only one paycheck with four kids and one job. That was great. You managed to do that, but that is impossible today, right? And I think there's this big disconnection between what they remember poorness was 30 years ago when they were walking the streets of their districts or their states, and what the hell it means today. And it's I think it's interesting to see then what they define it, and to see how that compares to the reality of what poor is, because again, maybe what they're thinking is true, but again, it's 30 years outdated. 30 years outdated, their conception of what poverty was. I don't
Yes, I
know.
completely agree. And they don't have to, they don't have to worry about, they don't have to worry about affording health insurance, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
that's one of their perks. And
Mm-hmm.
they don't have to worry about paying for a place to live in DC because that's one of their perks. And
Yeah.
they, like they'll never have to worry about choosing between medications or food,
Mm-hmm.
or heat and food, and so I think they're so removed. And maybe sometimes also I think the government has a way of just like numerizing us. I don't know if that's a word.
Mm.
I think I just made that up. But like we're just numbers. I'm pretty sure I did. But we're just numbers, right?
Yeah.
And so they'll see your mom at 12,000, but they won't see her as a woman who actually has a life,
Mm-hmm.
who's actually living, who has to leave the house, who has to find a way to provide paper towels and toilet paper and toothpaste. And,
Yeah.
so I think that's one of the problems too, is that they really don't see us as constituents. They see us as just budget line
Yeah,
items.
I think that much of them don't see us even as a humans, right? They don't see the
Yes,
humanity in the
exactly.
life of many of the people that are suffering this. And again, it's just, I don't know. I struggle a lot with this topic. I struggle a lot with understanding the positions of the ideological positions of many people, particularly, when they, I don't know. Again, I come from a religious family, and it's difficult when for some reason they also try to use the scripture as a guidance to justify their individualistic tendency or policy preferences. Um, I think that I only know it in Spanish, but essentially is there's a phrase in the Bible that if you didn't sweat the work of or something like that, then you should not eat, or something like, if you didn't work for it, you should not eat. And so people, I've seen people that I grew up with, being like these moral guidelines, or figures that to follow. And then I grew up and went to college, and then I started reading the things that they were putting out, and I was like, what the hell are you talking about? Even them living in conditions that are not wealthy, and they still justify these type of policies, because again, it's a very individualistic notion of how to treat us. And I'm not responsible for your suffering. That's it. I'm not responsible for the suffering of others. I don't care about it, and that's it for a lot of
Yes,
people.
I totally agree. Probably, um, I've lost a lot of relationships over the past 3 years. Uh, uh, and one of the biggest reasons is because I've questioned people's their profession,
Mm-hmm.
uh, their proclamations
Yeah.
of being Bible fearing. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, it also says to feed the poor. Like Jesus was a radical.
Mm-hmm.
He was an organizer,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm like, he would have been flipping tables, like, but y'all act like he would be sitting there just participating and nodding his head and praying with the president. I'm
Yeah.
like, that's not the way I had Jesus pictured. And
Yeah.
so it's probably that religious, um, and we could probably get really in the weeds here, but
Yeah.
it's almost like uh, America like loves to be this pro-life banner waving country, and yet what do we do with kids after they're born?
Mm-hmm.
You know, we don't worry if they're fed. We don't worry
Mm-hmm.
if they're housed. We don't worry if they have health insurance. You know, it's like once life begins, then hey, you're on your own.
Yeah. Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, and if you fail, it's because you did something wrong, because you
Mm-hmm.
didn't try hard enough. You know, it's not because um actually, this is a little sidebar. So I was in a training the other day, and the question was asked, um, what were your ancestors' expectations wishes for you?
Okay.
And uh, have you lived up to those? Like, what, did it happen?
Mm-hmm.
And sorry, um, I was thinking, and I was like, I don't know if I really know what my grandparents' expectations were. They wanted me to be happy and they wanted me to be healthy, but we didn't talk about what they wanted me to do for a living or any of that stuff. But my grandfather, he worked for the same company for over 30 years, and
Okay.
he knew when he was going to retire that he would be able to retire, and he
Mm-hmm.
still wouldn't have to worry about paying his bills. He still wouldn't have to worry about health insurance. He
Mm-hmm.
like he didn't have to come out of retirement so he could survive,
Yeah.
and I'm like, that's gone. It's
Mm-hmm.
like that part of America, I think that part of the great American dream is gone. You
Mm-hmm.
know, I um I don't know. I don't I don't know. It breaks my heart now, because so many times my daughters and I will go somewhere and we'll see an elderly person working.
Mm.
And my daughters will say, "Oh, they shouldn't have to do that." And I know that some people come out of retirement because they're bored and they need something
Mm-hmm.
to do. Um, but I also know that it's because, like your mother, they're living on very fixed incomes, and if they didn't work, they would starve to death.
Yeah.
And I'm like, why are we not addressing the fact that they don't deserve to live like that? No one
Mm-hmm.
deserves to not be able to have their basic needs met. I mean, that's a basic social work idea, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Like, if you
Yeah.
don't have your basic needs met, there's no way you're ever going to be able to improve your condition. And so we forget that. And so like that has to be included somewhere in life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that means you're going to have to help me be fed,
Yeah.
right? Like, or I'm never going to be happy enough. I'm never going to be able to pursue anything,
Mm-hmm.
right? Especially happiness, if I'm constantly worrying about where I'm going to live or what I'm going to eat, or how I'm going to pay for my prescription meds, or if I can have health insurance or not. And so I just, again, I think it's really a time for us to, just the people, like, we have to start telling our stories, and we have to start putting faces, and, like you said, bringing the humanity back into these issues.
Mm-hmm.
Like, constantly have to let them see faces of people, real people, and just realize, hey, this isn't what this is supposed. We're supposed to be the greatest country in the world, and
Mm-hmm.
what 140 million people are in poverty. I think that's the number the Poor People's Campaign uses.
Mm-hmm.
Like, how in the world? How can we be the greatest country in the world when we have 43% of children across America living on food stamps?
Mm-hmm.
you know so I mean, like, it just has to be this moment of we're just gonna have to make them look at us, I think.
Yeah, coincidentally today I started volunteering with this organization called Meals on Wheels, and so
Yes.
I started today, and I was delivering in my route food to elderly people, and it was impressive and heartbreaking to see some people that were living in conditions that no human being should live it that way, right? No need, no. The government should not allow um, older people to essentially beg to be fed. Um, there should not be a situation in which these type of organization needed to exist if the government had done its work, right? And I remember a lady ending my route, that she thanked me, very lovely her, for the work I was doing, right?
Mhm.
And it put me, to question it. The thing is that I had like extra milk that people didn't want, and I told her like, hey, do you want this extra milk? I'm not gonna drink it. I can't drink it, and it's gonna be spoiled. And she was so grateful because she was telling me like sometimes I don't have people, to go to the store and buy me, the groceries, so this is a very good help. So I'm very thankful for the things that the work that you're doing. It's my first day, and at the start, I just, I was coming back home, I was just questioning myself. I was, yeah, this is a good thing to do, and I enjoy it because I know that I'm giving back to my community. I have the free time. These people need to be fed, so let's do the work, right? Let's try and help them. But at the same time, I was like, but I should not need to do this, right? Meals on Wheels should not need to exist if we had a proper government, right? This is why every time that I see NGOs and stuff like that, I hesitate, right? And one of the first things that I always question when I see them is, what is your expiration date, right? I think that,
Mhm.
these organizations need to have an expiration date. They need to have a purpose, and that purpose needs to be whichever it is. It's a point in which a point in which we have a country in which you are no longer needed, right? That should always be the aim, and that's why every time that I see organizations that I ask them that question and they don't have an answer for it, then I am starting questioning, right? Because then you're just profiting from the crisis. You're not solving the issue. You're just allowing, because you want to exist all the time. And if you just want to exist itself, then you don't have a purpose to fix anything, just to put, resolve this, maybe this issue here, maybe that. And at the end of the year you have a party, and send out, all to your members, a pamphlet saying, hey, we managed to do this and this and this, and you're not resolving anything. And again, I saw many of these people that I got the chance to meet today for the first time. And some of them, they were in somewhat good conditions, good houses. But other ones, I was like, wow, that's, where's your family? Where's the government? Where's the responsibility of the state here? Um, and this is my getting out of the way. But I was saying, and probably most of these people, when it comes to the election, they are voting against their own interests. I bet your ass that that's what they're doing, right? They're voting against their own interests. May they
Yes.
not know better or whatever. But I was like, you have their only fault in this is just voting the wrong way. Voting the wrong way. um
Yes.
yeah.
Or not voting at all,
Or not
right?
voting at all, exactly. Yeah,
Yes.
definitely.
I've had that conversation. That's one of my most frequently had conversations is, um, what do we do to get people to vote, and then to get people to vote according to what they need,
Mm-hmm.
not blue or red.
Mm-hmm.
I'm so tired of the party. Personally, I'm just tired of the party lines. I'm like, can we just concentrate on doing what's freaking right?
Yeah.
Who gives a damn if you're
Mm-hmm.
Democrat or Republican at this point? We're
Mm-hmm.
hurting. Like this,
Yeah.
especially with COVID, all it's done is exasperate West Virginia is already poor, poor state anyway. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it's just elevated. Now people are seeing it for the first time, I guess is
Yeah.
maybe that's what it's done.
Mm-hmm.
They can't ignore it any longer. And so, but like you were talking, like there is no expiration date. So what do we do? Like that's a great point that you just brought up to me. But what do we do about that? Is it charity? Is that what we seek as a country? To constantly be given?
Mm-hmm.
Is it to keep us complacent?
Mm-hmm.
If they just keep doing things for us, we don't have to do them for ourselves, right?
Yeah.
Or is it just truly a lack of understanding that if you would just help fix the system, if you would just help push the government for jobs that paid a livable wage, if we could put caps on how much you charge people to rent houses in
Mm-hmm.
places, if we could, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
Make insurance more equitable, health insurance more equitable, so I mean, I just, oh, I don't know.
I
I don't know.
I I think that sometimes when I think of the U.S. and that the inherent contradictions that exist, both in how we are brought up sometimes in our moral fabric and how we are structured and how our principles sometimes it is bizarre because I think that this country in many ways has a very odd conception of what liberty is and what freedom is. And so I find it very interesting how people don't want government getting involved in anything. Like I don't want them in my
Mm.
business. I don't want government. I hate big government. Let people, entrepreneurs and flourish by themselves because apparently that's what people can do. But at the same time, they love when rich people, Bill Gates and all of these people are giving handouts and giving, and their foundations and stuff like that. And it's like, so what is it that you don't like, right? What is it that really bothers you at the end of the day? Because wouldn't you rather have a specific policy that helps everyone than just waiting for, I don't know, one billionaire to come around and give some help or give some funding
That's
to
a
an
tax
NGO?
write-off, right?
Yeah,
That he
exactly.
uses as a tax write-off.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Y- So it's just this constant contradiction that uh, government give outs is bad, but if billionaires give it to us, then this is good. We have to benefit from this. Like what the hell? Like
Yes.
how are you processing that inherent contradiction? I don't
Yes.
understand.
Um I don't understand either. I was thinking about um I don't know, the moral failings. I think that's where I've been landing a lot. And like the definition of democracy. I was the same training about the ancestor question. A
Mhm.
woman said, democracy goes beyond voting.
Mhm.
And I was like, damn. Like, let's talk about that, right? Like,
Mhm.
let's talk about that democracy means I should be able to go to bed without my belly hungry,
Yeah.
right? Democracy means that I should be able to go and put gasoline in my car
Yeah.
to go to work,
Mhm.
and I'm like, maybe we should just start finding points like that and just keep drilling them out there, like, make signs and billboards and videos and, like we have to change the way that we think about this. And the other question that I've been wrestling with is, why is it so easy for us to fight with each other
Mm.
rather than to stand up to the politicians that we don't know? Like, I mean, I've had cousins disown me. I've had, um, you know, my own mom and I go back and forth on the daily about some
Mm.
sort of social ill,
Yeah.
just the generation gap. But I mean, so uh, why is it so easy for us to treat each other as if we're disposable
Mhm.
and yet not take all that angst and that bitterness and just that anger and put it towards the people who are the decision makers,
Yeah.
because everyone can be mad they could be as mad at me as they want to, and not speak to me at the next family reunion or whatever, but
Yeah.
for what? I can't fix what you think is wrong,
Mhm.
but so what is it about us and the way we've been raised to feel as if we just can't speak to them the way we speak to one another?
Yeah. I think there's an inherent institutional thing that has there that I think that fear has been intentional, right? It has been put by the state
Absolutely.
to essentially create that separation and be submissive to what the state is doing, be submissive to its policies, and therefore it's easier to fight with one another instead of the
Absolutely.
state against the state. Yet again, inherent right, whether used to say that the state has a monopoly of violence, right? So when you see all these rallies and stuff like that, essentially that happens. you've been seeing this past few months with the racial discussion after Floyd's death, etc., and how the government and the police and how even Trump has articulated what they want as a response has always been a violent response, right? Has been a confrontational response, has been a repressive response. And so any type of disobedience, even if it's civil, will want to be enforced, and their repercussions are violent and can be repercussions for the rest of your life, right? If you get in jail, then maybe you have now you have a record and stuff like that. So I think there's a very institutionalized fear from the state to not question it, and if you question it, you have to question it nicely through a social media post or through a mail, or the most violent that you can be at voting out a person. But then you can, fight the hell out of your neighbor or your family member, because you know that there's no consequences there, right? As you're seeing it as equals, and we don't see ourselves as equals to the state. We don't even see ourselves as essentially those that are have the possession of the sovereignty, the power at the end of the day. That idea that the power relies or isn't with the people, we say that, but we just say that because it sounds pretty. But I don't
Yes.
think people really believe it at the end of the day. I don't think that people really find themselves as powerful when they come to compare themselves to the state. And I think a lot of the issue, this might be more complicated than what I'm saying, but I think that a lot of the issue relies and how it has been intentional for us, from the state to us, to not question what they are doing, and just be, I think, civil in a way that you don't make anybody uncomfortable.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, the system's designed to keep us out. It's designed like that on purpose. And I think, that was when I went to Congress in February. That was the third time I've been to Congress.
Okay.
It was totally different. I'd never been there. Excuse me, I'd never been there. I mean, it wasn't as serious.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it wasn't as regimented as that time was, but I'd gone once with the Poor People's Campaign, and I had
Okay.
gone once before that um, to ask the Senate to please reauthorize CHIP insurance because my children were insured by CHIP at the time.
Okay.
Um, but there was something so different about this time. I have talking to people that's one of my gifts. Like I
Mm-hmm.
will strike up a conversation with you in the line at the grocery store.
Okay.
I love to talk. I'm one of those people, one of those
Yeah.
annoying people. So I drive my kids crazy with it, but I mean, it's just I love people, and
Yeah.
um, this time there was something so different about the whole thing that I was terrified. I mean, I'm always a little nervous, but I used to sing in bands, and
Mm-hmm.
I mean, so being on stage, I was a performer. So I mean, that helps me a little bit to be able to get in front of rooms of people. But
Yeah.
there was something about this. I was just absolutely terrified to the point where my boss rode with me, and she was supposed to go to a different meeting. She wasn't going to go with me. I was going to walk in there by myself, and we rode to DC together. It's about a 4.5 hour ride from my house, and she looked at me and she said, "Are you scared?" And I said, "I'm terrified. I'm like, I don't know what's wrong. I'm like,
Yeah.
I've never been like this before." And she said, "I've never seen you like this before." And I don't know, I mean, people don't know me, but that's why I was so active with my hands,
Mm-hmm.
because they wouldn't stop shaking.
Mm.
And um, everything kind of went wrong that morning. My mom and I had an argument before we went. Before I went, my mom was like, "You can't." I said, "I'm wearing blue jeans." She's like, "You can't wear blue jeans." And I said, "I'm wearing my blue jeans." And she's like, "You can't." So I put my blue jeans in the bag, but I also put an outfit of dress clothes in the bag too. And
Okay.
but I wouldn't feel comfortable like that, right? Like that's not who I am. And so
Mm-hmm.
anyway, I went to get dressed the morning of, and I had a coffee stain on my pant leg. I had a big stain on my sweater, and I'm like, "Well, I can't go in there looking like this." And so
Yeah.
I ended up wearing my blue jeans to Congress anyway, which didn't matter because you couldn't see my legs. But I mean, it was,
Yeah.
my voice was shaking and I started to cry. I was absolutely filled with terror because I didn't know the rules. Like,
Mm.
I was told you're going to be sworn in. I had to submit a statement beforehand that I was told would be on a permanent record. It will never disappear, what I
Mm.
said. And I mean, it was just all of these rules, and I didn't know the etiquette. And, you know, um, like what I didn't know what to do when I started crying, sitting in my chair, and I didn't know where the tissues were, and it was kind of, there was a moment at the end where everyone behind me, the room was packed,
Mhm.
and uh, all the people behind me started clapping their hands. And afterwards, a staffer, I don't even know who the woman worked for, to be honest with you, but she came up to me and she said, I think I need to point something out to you that, she's like, I think you missed it. And I'm like, what was that? And she said, they weren't allowed to clap their hands like that. She said, in these hearings, you aren't allowed to make any noise. You're not allowed to
Mm.
respond. You're not allowed to say anything. And she said, the moment that they started clapping their hands, they all chose a side. They chose your side
Mm.
because they could
Wow.
have all been kicked out of this room,
Mhm.
you know? And so, I mean, it was just that moment, like, wow, did they know? Because I'm betting they probably didn't. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like, I just
Yeah.
don't, but then they risked it anyway, and so I'm like, those are the moments that I took away from me. Like, um, my job is to teach people the skills and to empower them to go speak to power. Like, that's what I do.
Mhm.
And even though I hadn't been nervous about that in a while, like that day was a stark reminder of exactly how scary it is, And so I'm grateful for that opportunity just because I was truly shook. I was a mess, and so I'm grateful for the fact that I was able to go back into a situation that scared me. I mean, I
Yeah.
didn't know, they really don't design it for us, right? I
Mhm.
mean, was I going to get in trouble for saying damn? Was I, what were they going to do when I said shame on you? Because I
Yeah.
had my speech
Yeah.
written, for a couple of weeks. Like, I knew what I was going to say, and so it was just all that, like, how are they going to treat me? Were they going to ask me questions that were going to upset me? What if I freaked out and I just wanted to leave?
Mhm.
So, I mean, but I think the more we do it, the more we can normalize it. And
Yeah.
I think we absolutely have to. To me, I read today where the president has asked his admin to write an executive order to do away with payroll tax contributions for Social Security and Medicare. And I'm just sitting there like, are you even kidding me right now? Just
Mhm.
when I think we can't get any more twisted than what we already are,
Yeah.
something like this comes up. And I truly was just, I'm like, there's no ends, right? Like, every time I think I've heard it all, then something else comes up. And
Yeah.
I just became so angry about that. And so my mom lives here, and she's 74 years old. And I said, hey, Mom, I was like, have you heard? I'm like, the president wants to end payroll tax contributions for Social Security and Medicare. And my mom said, what? And I said, do you know what that means? And she said, that means that when it's time for you to retire, you won't have any money.
Mm.
And so I'm like, everyone understands that language. Everyone has someone that they care about that is
Mhm.
going to be the ones affected by this years from now. Like, my mom said, it probably won't affect me. I'm 74. She said, but by the time you're ready to draw Social Security, there won't be any Social Security. And
Yeah.
so I'm like, at what point are we just going to stand up and say, enough, I'm
Mhm.
done?
Mhm.
You know,
Mhm. Yeah.
rattle the windows, right? Like,
Yeah.
I'm done.
Yeah, yeah.
So I don't know. I'm sorry.
No.
I'm starting to preach a little bit now, but
No, no, no. I completely agree and enjoyed uh, listening to you because I completely agree with what you just said. And I think it's sad sometimes that we still need to make people understand this issue by triangulating it back to somebody in their lives, right? We don't see people that these are things that should just be objectively fought for and that they should be part of our norm. we need to make them understand, but remember that you have family that could be affected about this. That fact that, because I should not like, it should not be an issue for me just because my mom and my grandmother and my grandfather have social security. That should not be the reason that I support social security. I should be
Right.
supportive and defend it just as a principle, right? And when we say things like that, people say, "Oh,
Yes.
but you're being too idealistic and stuff like that." Hell no. This should be just the basis of our discussion, is understanding that this should be fundamental. And again, it's like when we talk about gender violence and stuff like that. Oh, she was a somebody's daughter, or remember your mom or your sister. Who the hell cares? Like, yes, you care, but it's not the reason why you defend these type of policies. You should defend them just because they should be
Yes,
just the
because it's
standard
right
barrier.
and
Yes.
just. Yes. Yes, I completely agree. And I was kind of hoping that out of COVID would come just this moment of almost awakening, and one of the things that I tell people about organizing, especially when you're talking about organizing marginalized folks,
Mm-hmm.
is that the benefit has to outweigh the risks,
Yeah.
right? And I said it's typically that one thing that truly breaks someone's heart that allows them to dig deep enough to find the strength to go and do what scares them the most,
Mm-hmm.
and so I'm like, COVID surely is going to break our hearts enough to where we stand up and we're like, we're done.
Mm-hmm.
We can't do this anymore. I mean, just the fact that I found myself really mad a couple of weeks. It might have been last week, but the last couple of weeks, all this conversation now about kids going back to school,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm on one side. I have teacher friends on the other side, and but we could get sick and we could die and we could do this. And I was like, whoa, 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 whoa! My life is filled with essential workers,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so my essential worker friends didn't get to call off their retail jobs
Mm-hmm.
because they might get sick and die. They weren't given masks and gloves and hand
Mm.
sanitizer when this mess first started. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
No one knew what this was going to become. And I was like, so when did we as a society decide, well, this profession deserves to live and
Yeah.
this profession really doesn't?
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, it's twisted. And I'm like, I can't. You're complaining about how scared you are. You have health insurance and you have a union and you have paid time off. You get all the summers off,
Mm-hmm.
whereas my people are out here working with very little paid time off, if any, right?
Yeah.
Paid sick days when you're an essential worker, a low paid worker, are pretty slim and none. I said most of them don't have health insurance that I know. I'm like, so where was our concern for those folks when they were literally on the front lines of this? I'm like, they're the freaking warriors,
Yeah.
and so I think it's because we get trapped in this, I call it poor mouthing, right? So like,
Yeah.
my situation it has to be worse than your situation,
Mm.
regardless. I just have to be the worst one. I have to be the poorer of the two,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm like, we need to knock that off, because I do support the teachers. I do understand what they're saying, but I need for them and the rest of America to start thinking about those essential workers that have been out there since, the beginning of this pandemic, with very little to no protection, working for wages that won't allow them to pay their rent,
Yeah.
without HUD assistance. And I'm like, we just have to, um, I think we have to realize that if we start erring on the side of the disadvantaged in this country, every single person is going to benefit.
Yeah. Definitely.
You know, I mean, I just, it blows my mind. I've reading all these articles about that $600 a week unemployment boost that folks have been receiving, and I'm blessed. I know how blessed I am to not have to have gone on unemployment during this. And um,
Mm-hmm.
I read yesterday someone had tweeted, that's only $31,000 a year, right? So if you get $600 a week, that's $31,000 a year. And so in my head, I went right to the federal poverty guidelines. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, people are so mad over something that would still, if that $600 a week was all you had, you would still qualify for government assistance,
Mm-hmm.
right? But
Mm-hmm.
yet we're willing to just like verbally throat punch each other
Yeah.
because we're so mad because that person didn't work and they
Yeah.
got $600 a week.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's still poverty.
Yeah.
right? Like,
Yeah.
why are you fighting them about being poor? Like,
Mm-hmm.
stop.
Yeah.
Just stop. So I don't know.
I,
I don't know.
I completely agree, and I find it interesting when you were talking about that factor of when as a society we've decided to that one profession is more worthy of living than the other, and I was brought back to a conversation that I had once with an aunt of mine, that we were in a restaurant in Puerto Rico, and I think it was near 2016 or something like that. I think it was near that debate, the primary between Bernie and Hillary, and I think that one of the discussions or one of the things that were raised in that debate and has been risen afterwards is increasing the minimum wage, right, to $15 an hour, and so she was I was saying that I supported that. That I think that 725 is just nobody should live under
Yeah.
that. That's
Yeah.
just absurd. And so, I think one of the points that she threw out there was that she said no waitress deserves $15 an hour, right? And I was like, why? And she was like, I've done that work. That work does not deserve $15 an hour. And so I found that I was like,
Mm.
in what world can you arbitrarily decide that because you've done something or you've experimented something, I don't know how long ago, then that profession, because you know how hard they work or how little they work, whatever is it that you are determining it, then that's what they should earn, right? They should earn less, not a livable wage, because I was saying like this is just basic things for them to be able to live, right? Not that's it, not to be just to live. I'm not saying that for them to buy a
Mhm.
yacht. I'm not saying for them to have three houses, nothing like that. Just to be able to live, to buy their food, to just have basic shit that they want and need. And she just was no. I disagree. I believe that $15 an hour for a waitress is too much money. And come to another point is that I find it very interesting. I think it's just circling back to how we initiated our conversation. Is that I found situations in which a lot of people that have come with very humble upbringings, that they've managed to get out of those communities, of out of that you know toxic environment that is inherent in poverty, right? That they're now wealthy, that they're doing well, that when they get to those positions, instead of working to have more people from their communities getting out of it, they support policies and situations that not only makes those people stay where they are, but in many cases make them even worse their situations, right? And for me, is this idea for many people, this is my read of the situation, is that particularly when people get out, these type of people, when they get out of that situation of poverty and they manage to get that and they become that type of mentality, for me what they sing is, I think for them the value of what they have is contingent to the struggle that they went through to arrive to that socioeconomic position that is better than what they were, and for them to for that value to perpetuate and not be devalued, um, they need for everybody in similar situations to have the same shitty path that they had to go to arrive there, and if able to be even worse, because that's and then rises the value of wherever they are, right? I don't know if you may agree with what I'm saying, if it makes sense, but for me, I've seen not so many people that they make it in life, whatever that may be, and they it's like they don't maybe verbalize it, but with their actions, with their positions, how they express themselves, and the attitude that they have towards people that are from the same communities or similar communities where they come from, is that you need to hustle, you need to struggle, you need to fight your way back the same way as I did, because if
Yes.
not, then you were just handed out your the other person was handed out their success, and it has this value, and mine is and you cannot devalue my struggle, right? I don't know how you react to what I've said, but for me that's sort of a very, because I've seen it too many times, is that I can come up.
Yeah, I had someone say that to me just the other day. Was I grew up in your neighborhood. I know what it's like to be poor, but I worked hard and I got an education. And I'm like, look, I have an education too.
Yeah.
I also have all that student loan debt that goes with it. And
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Like, and so yeah, but I totally get it. It is just like that. Why do you need it? Why do you need to have it any easier than I had it?
Mm-hmm.
You know? Yeah, it's kind of like that bootstraps talk, right? Pull yourself.
Yes. Yes. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. I know that well, we've been talking for quite a while now, and I don't want to take more out of your time.
Oh, we have.
Yeah,
That
we've
went
been talking.
quickly, I think.
Yeah, that went quite quickly. um, but I want to. I think that just to be, heading to our conclusion, I know that you're doing a good work there in West Virginia. So I wanted to, part of our conversation was intended to talk about that, but I think that we digress to another element. We direct our conversation another in another direction, but which I really enjoyed. Um, so I wanted to for you to, if you're able to not only talk about what is the work that you're doing, right, and what does it mean to you, and but also how people can help, right? What are the how what are the means that people that are not meant necessarily in West Virginia, but they want to help whatever is the organization that you're working for, or any way that they may help from where they are with similar situation, because this is not a thing. Poverty, and children poverty and food insecurity and this sort of things are not sole issue of West Virginia or the Puerto Rico or whatever. They're worldwide, and so people should be able to at least listen to this and come out and say, okay, I want to be able to actively do this or that, and so from your experience, what do you think are ways in which we can help, not only bring awareness of this, but try to mitigate in any way possible, this crisis, because this is a crisis.
Yes, I agree. It is a crisis. I think the first thing is, um, the organization I work for is a grassroots organization that truly believes that the power is within the people on the ground.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Like, and if there are enough of us, enough noise that we can truly bring about the change that we need
Yeah.
to improve the quality of our lives. And so with that being said, um, I bet you there's an organization like that in every single state across the United
Mm.
States that's doing the same exact work in your own backyard.
Yeah.
And trust me when I say they're waiting on you.
Mm-hmm.
They've been waiting for you to find them and to
Yeah.
and to sign up on it and to help. But anything you know, I think one of the most important parts, especially those who aren't living in a marginalized class, if you have time on your hands to email the electeds, to call the electeds, to post on their social media pages, like to just keep showing up. And if you have any sort of privilege that allows you for more time to do that, or to feel better equipped to do that, or um, even, I don't know, even just use that privilege,
Mm-hmm.
to like we were talking about earlier, right? If you're working from home and you're on your phone, send an email to an elected
Yeah.
official and tell them that you think that we need to have a better view of what poverty really looks like across the United States. That too many of us are affected, and I think the other part is if you work anywhere or have any connections anywhere. That you feel it would be beneficial for someone to hear the stories of impacted folks, then please reach out to impacted folks and allow them that opportunity, because um, I think a lot of what my role is, my personal life and my professional life, is just to help open doors for folks that typically wouldn't be able to open those doors for themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you are holding on to any sort of privilege or networking connections, anything like that, that would be a space where it would be impactful for people to come and tell their stories and reach out to a grassroots group or reach out to a social service agency and say, hey, do you have anyone who would like to come and tell their story? Because again, like we talked about this today, we need to bring the humanity back into all of this legislation and all of this policy work.
Yeah.
And so the only way to do that is to let them see us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
And I
completely
mean,
mhm.
I'm sorry. Go
No, no,
ahead.
no. Say.
Um, I also have there is a Rattle the Windows Facebook page.
Oh,
Rattle the Windows was one of the lines in my speech, and it kind of
yeah.
people just started saying it right
Yeah.
online in the comment section, and so there is a Rattle the Windows Facebook page, and there's a domain out there that I really haven't had the time or energy to play around with. An organizer
Yeah.
friend of mine purchased the domain for me, but there's a really good picture on the front page. Like, so if you want to go to rattlethewindows.org and sign up for the email list or anything like that, please do so. And then, of course, anyone, if you want to see what type of work the organization I work for does, it's ourfuturewv.org is the name of our
Okay.
website. But yeah, I would just say, there is a need right now in everyone's community
Mhm.
that people need help addressing. And so I don't think there's any more impactful work when it comes to organizing than that that's taking place in your backyard. So that would be my suggestion: is go and get plugged in somehow, and find out where your voice and your power is needed the most.
Yeah. I completely agree. I'm gonna put all these links also in the notes of this episode, so people, if if makes it easier for you, for people that listening want to reach out, they can go to the notes and get this. And I think that one of the last things that I want to say, because I think it's important to mention, right? What we've this has been just a discussion between us, right? This topic is so much more complex, so much more nuanced than whatever we have that Amy, Joe, and I have discussed here, right? This just was like a broader opening part of I think a very deep and nuanced conversation that we need to consider, not only with the gender differences that are with poverty, that are with the racial differences that are in poverty. A black single woman going through poverty with children is not the same probably as a white woman, because there's there inherent privileges and differences that are there. We did not talk about them today. We didn't go into
Exactly.
those details today, but that doesn't mean that we're not that neither Amy or I are unaware of them, or that they're less important, right? That they're equally important as us, because again, there's so much that you can discuss in this time that we've had, that's around hour and a half. So yeah, I just want to say this to make it clear that anybody that may listen to this doesn't say, oh, but you didn't mention this or that. We are aware. There's we just want to have a broader discussion of our experiences with what we understand or we studied, or we have reached out with what we've seen as what poverty has done, both in our work experience for her in her life and my life, and how we've come about it to understand these topics and analyze them. So there's so much more to be said. There's the
Yes.
conversation is so much broader than this. Um, but obviously that would be for another episode, which I would gladly have again Amy Joe with me, because I really, really enjoyed this conversation with you today. Um,
I
I'm,
did as
I'm,
well.
I really, I'm glad that we made this happen, and I'm really honored to have been able to meet you and have you as one contact, and have you at my podcast. It's, it's been a real pleasure and honor to have you here.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. This has been fun. You're easy to
Yeah.
talk to.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're
Thank you.
welcome.
So yeah, well, Amy, thank you very much. Well, people, there you have it. I hope you have enjoyed my conversation with Amy Jo. And I think everything has been said. I don't think that I need to say anything more. Other than, I hope that you give this podcast a chance and this new venture that it has, starting to incorporate episodes in English. I hope that you can share it, that you can disseminate this through other people that could enjoy our conversation. But also, I hope that you can leave us a review and a rating. But most importantly, right, that you take into heart what we discuss here and that you broaden, serve as an echo, right, to all that is happening, and that you can take out something out of this our discussion and put it into practice. Amy Jo gave some suggestions. I think that they were great, but also we just need social conscience about these, and we need to continue this conversation beyond what we tend to have. So I'm gonna leave it here. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you can share it, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.